Hello and welcome to part 2 of the Nerfpocalypse. It's been a little bit delayed, but I've had a little bit of time to play around with all the changes to Ariane and build a few decks to really get a good idea of what I think about these changes. We're going to start off with probably the signature card for Ariane when you're a new player to the game, and that's Earth Blast. Now this has changed from being an 8 cost support, which deals damage to your rival equal to the number of cards in your hand, to a 6 cost support, deal damage to rival equal to the amount of support cards in your hand. Now I don't think Earthblast really needed a change necessarily. I don't think it was that strong because it took a lot of setup. If you play against an Ariane who was building up 8 gold, a big hand size, you kind of knew what was coming. So you could play around it. You could build up your armor to absorb the damage. You could steal some gold, make her discard some cards. There were ways you could play around this. But again, I don't think this change is necessarily a bad change. When we come on to the Lady Heffin change in a second, you'll be able to see that they're trying to create 2 completely separate deck archetypes for Ariane. Now, the Earth Blast is going to fit in a more support-driven spell-based Ariane, so it can be comboed with things like the Lunar Spellbook, the Ancient Spellbook, and even the new Lady Zay, because the cannonballs are all support cards, so they kind of fit in well with the Earth Blast. Whereas the Lady Heffin is based on monsters, so it's a completely separate kind of Ariane deck. So yeah, overall I don't necessarily think the change was needed, but the change that Jagex have gone with, I quite like. So I'm going to give this an 8 out of 10. Next up, as I just mentioned, is Lady Heffin. Now that was a horrendously strong card. The tempo swing that it allowed Ariane to have was almost game breaking. If you were an aggro deck against an Ariane, you would be almost killing them, and then all of a sudden they could heal for 16 or 18 really, really easily. So the change they've gone with, it's actually been made cheaper, and now it's based on the number of creatures in your hand. So again, this is where some good deck building skills are really useful. If you can create an Ariane deck which is based on creatures rather than spells, then Lady Heffin is still one of the best heals in the game. You're going to have to look for some different heals if you're going for the spellbook based decks, but there are plenty out there. So yeah, overall I do quite like this change because it was a very, very strong card, and I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. Next up we've got Infeeble. Now it's quite a simple change. This card now is going to cost 1 gold instead of being completely free. I think it's fairly well justified. The effect of removing 5 attack from your next creature is huge, and it can mean Ariane, a 1-attack Ariane can 1-hit kill pretty much anything they need to. The discard 1 random card isn't really that much of an effect when an Ariane is generally going to have lots of cards, so if there's something they don't want to discard, the chances are they're probably not going to. So yeah, overall I do quite like this change as it goes. And I'm going to go and give this a rating of 10 out of 10. It's a spot on change in my opinion. Haunted Soul. Once a staple in all Ariane decks, now just a shadow of its former self. Now, I do agree there was a change needed on this card, because dropping 2 gold was huge. It synergized so nicely with things like Archmage Sedrador and Pirate's Hideout when Zarian was a thing. But I think removing both gold from this card is just a step too far. Ariane, since closed beta, has pretty much had all of the gold taken off her basic set. There's not much, if any, around now. So if you want to build an Ariane deck that needs gold, you can't really have many Ariane specific cards in there, and I don't think that's healthy for the class. It kind of loses its identity a little bit. In my opinion, I would have kept 1 gold on this. So yeah, I'm going to have to give this a rating of 3 out of 10. Skeletal Peon. Now, this change of adding 1 health to the card was first mentioned way back in the closed beta, back in 2015. And in the end, Jagex decided against it because there were so many other nerfs going through at the same time. And I think they might have made a bit of a mistake going through with this one again. I just think on top of all the other changes that Ariane has seen, this is just a kick in the teeth. Ariane's thing is to do with drawing cards and spells, and I think it was quite nice, Ariane having a 2/2 that draws 2 cards that no other class can have. It doesn't really impact the game directly because you can't. It's not a damage dealing card or anything like that. It just opens up a lot more options to Ariane, and I think especially now with all the nerfs that have come in, that could be very, very needed. So it's still playable, but it does weaken Ariane even further. So I'm going to give this a 3 out of 10. Smoke Barrage. Now this is one of the spells from the Ancient Spellbook, and it used to remove 2 attack from your next creature and also remove your rival's weapon. Now I completely understand that Jagex don't really want hard weapon removal in the game, because it's not really fun. It shuts down deck types completely. But I don't really think the change that they've gone with is that interesting. Deal 3 damage to rival. Rival discards 1 card. There's no real thought behind playing this card now. You just want to play it as fast as possible so that your opponent discards something. Whereas before, with the previous version, taking away the fact that it removed a weapon, the fact that it removed 2 attack from your next creature was interesting, and there was some skill in being able to play that to get the best value out of it. So I would have liked to have kept that part of the card in the new version. So yeah, I think it does weaken the Ancient Spellbook. And the discard isn't as strong as a normal discard anyway, because your opponent can see it coming. So if they've got a very important card in their hand, and you've played an Ancient Spellbook, they know there's a chance that they're going to discard that card unless they play it. So they will play the card to get some value rather than losing it completely to get no value. So it's not as strong as a normal discard. So overall, I'm going to give this a rating of 4 out of 10. We'll see how this one goes. Stagger. Now this used to be a 4-cost spell that removed 1 base attack from your rival. Now I'm not too much of a fan of making it even more difficult to remove base attack from your opponent. I think that's a very important part of Chronicle. And if they nerf it too hard, so it's not valuable at all, then the game's going to get very boring very quickly. You need to be able to interact with your opponent. Yes, a 4-cost for that effect, I think that was way too strong. So yeah, it needed changing. Now, if we have a look at the change they've gone for, a 0-cost spell, Exhaust Yourself. At first I thought, okay, I can think of some ideas where I could use this. Like you could build an Ariane deck, a normal creature slaying Ariane aggro deck that doesn't want to go down to 1 base attack, but then you could put a Stagger in there, and then you can also put things like Wind Surge, Skeletal Mage, things that proc when you are on 1 base. And it would be quite interesting. And also you could potentially use the Stagger to dodge things like Dust Devils and Karams. But having played a lot of Ariane since the nerfs, there's just no room for it in the deck. There are plenty of other ways to be able to exhaust yourself to get even better effects. So to either Relisman's Balm, or if you want to go into Wind Surge, etc. You just play things like Greater Demons. They're so easy to kill if you can grab yourself a weapon or a crawling hand into them, and you get extra gold, you get a strike on your opponent. There's just so much more value in playing those than Stagger. So yeah, I think it's an interesting card. I just don't think it's very good. So I'm going to give this a rating of 5 out of 10. Vengeance. Now the Lunar Spellbooks haven't got away without a nerf, and this one is much needed. Previously it was deal damage to your rival equal to your hand size plus 5, and it basically, if they got that off, it's a guaranteed 11-12 damage because of all the card draw associated with the spellbook already. I think knocking the Vengeance down to just your hand size is still a very good amount of damage. The other spells in the book boost, group heal, and borrowed power are daft anyway. So the value of the Lunar Spellbook is still very high. It's still a top tier card. So yeah, I really like this card. 10 out of 10. Zamorakian Cultist. Now, this is a secretly powerful card apparently. Basically, having 2 asphyxiates in your hand is a lot stronger than you'd think, because you could throw one down and hope, and then if you missed, you still had a second chance. So it kind of reduced the amount of skill involved in playing the cards. And also, if you managed to keep them in your hand, you could absolutely cripple your opponent for multiple chapters, because they'd just be too scared to play anything. So I think reducing it to only adding 1 asphyxiate to your hand, I like it. It means you've really got to work out where you want to play that to get max value, and also it doesn't necessarily cripple your opponent. It is possible to play around 1 asphyxiate. And so obviously with the lower rewards on the card, the stat line of the card's been changed. It's 4/5. It's much easier to kill. You're much more willing to tank a hit from it. So yeah, I like this change. It's another 10 out of 10. So that's the end of my review of the Ariane nerfs. Overall, I think a lot of them were deserved, but Ariane as a class is much weaker than she used to be. I don't think it's necessarily healthy for the game if the main archetype of Ariane is an AP building strike deck. I think you need to be careful you don't destroy the support-based decks. And I think removing so much gold from Ariane, not just across this nerf, but previous nerfs as well, I think that might have gone a little bit too far, and maybe a couple of cards do need a little bit of gold adding. But I think we'll see. We'll see which Ariane decks appear in the ladder more often than others. Let me know what you're experiencing on the ladder. What Ariane decks you're seeing. I'm very interested to know. But yep, thanks for watching this, guys, and I'll see you next time.